Greetings, fellow movie watchers, and those who love all areas of entertainment. You are about to enter the discussion zone, a zone where we discuss the sights and the sounds, and maybe even that little bit extra. You're watching the Vlogcast. Of course, this time on the Vlogcast, I thought to myself, I've been starting things, and then I gave it to my wife, and then Jake hadn't gotten a chance to talk at all about his stuff or his list. So I would go ahead and start with Jake as we move instead of with me. So I will actually let him go first.
Okay, so we've been doing a lot of interesting viewing lately with Movies Galore, as we can see from Dave's little picture of alligator there. But I've also had a little bit of viewing on my own, and one thing that a lot of it has had to do is that, as the man says, get used to disappointment. So one thing that I did get to watch, and y'all know I kind of bitched about it a little bit on the message feed afterwards, but there's a series, a really important anime series from the 90s, a very interesting one, based on a manga by Yu Watase called Fushigi Yugi, The Mysterious Play. And it has a wonderful theme song, and it is a very interesting. It's an isekai series from before isekai was popular. Isekai, in case are not familiar with the term, is basically a protagonist travels to another realm where they are suddenly in a position of importance or something like that. You could think, I guess, of an American or British or whatever. You could be thinking about things like Harry Potter or trying to think. I know there's a really good American one, and I'm just drawing a blank. But whatever. So, and right now, it's such a big thing in anime that some people are sick of it. And some of the big ones right now, things like Sword Art Online and The Rising of the Shield Hero and some of those. But so Fushigi Yugi is an isekai where a high schooler is transported to ancient China through a mysterious book called the Book of the Four Gods or whatever it is. And as cruel fate would have it, her best friend is simultaneously transferred as well, and they're made priestesses for rival gods. And they each surround their own Bishonen harem, basically. Their reverse harem series in a way. And she, the main one, Miyaka, falls madly head over heels in love with her main defender, a money-wise street person named Tamahome. And that's the basic gist of the series. It's a 52-episode series. And I like to describe it as Romeo and Juliet meets the Book of Job, but an RPG version. So I watched the OVAs recently, having finally acquired them. I did not want to pay the exorbitant prices, partly because the first OVA is disappointing. The second OVA wraps things up nicely, and you hope they're done with it. And then the third OVA, Eikoden, happens. And as I said in the message feed, I realized this time, why Eikoden bugged me so much. There are multiple reasons, but one is it was uncomfortably similar to my experience of watching Gone with the Wind, which the first time I ever saw Gone with the Wind, I was bored to tears until a friend came up and we started watching it MST 3K style. And that worked for a while, but eventually it still got boring. And then when I finally saw it again, I realized that my biggest issue is I freaking hate Scarlett O'Hara. I freaking hate her. There are very few characters in any classic movie I hate more than Scarlett O'Hara, and which makes Rhett Butler's final line just that much better. All y'all seen that movie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Scarlett O'Hara is not for everybody. Like, she's very much very much an acquired taste or whatever. But I think so a couple of things with her as a character. She was very not typical of a lot of female protagonists of her era. You know, she was the book Gone with the Wind was wildly popular in its day, and you know, is written by Margaret Mitchell, and you know, it's one of those things that I think if someone were to write a character like that today, you know, it wouldn't be quite as. I don't think it would make quite as much of a. It wouldn't cause as much of a stir as it did, but also wouldn't necessarily be as captivating as she was at the time. Because keep in mind that Scarlett O'Hara as a character, she is someone who she does what she needs to survive and has very few scruples, but she also it's a double-edged sword because she has very few scruples and does a lot of immoral things, but at the same time she raises herself and her family up from abject poverty. You know, they were wealthy plantation owners, and then in the wake of in the aftermath of the Civil War, they got less than nothing, and you know, she did what she had to do to, you know, make it wasn't exactly honorable, but she had the I think it was Margaret Mitchell herself had said that the book was about survival and about what is it about a person that makes them persevere, what makes other people not survive. You know, and she was the only one out of her entire family, you know, and they were all these very like classical Southern genteel aristocracy, the closest that America's ever had to that in that region. You know, that you know, they were very well suited for polite society, and then as soon as that collapses around them, she's the only one who literally, you know, she has to, you know, pull her sleeves up. She has to eat a carrot from the ground, you know, because she's starving so much. It's like, you know, I think that it's one of those things where, yeah, she's not exactly pleasant much of the time, but she has tremendous courage and tremendous strength that very few people possess. And, you know, I think she still stands out among, well, characters in general, let alone female characters. You know, she has a pretty remarkable. I don't know. She's got she had what it took to build herself back up out of nothing, and
she is notable. I'll give her that. And
yeah,
I think part of the issue again, and this is part of the reason why I held it against her, is you're right about the background. Yes, she was very much entrenched in that antebellum plantation aristocracy. So right away, I lose a lot of sympathy for her right out of the gate, just because of her family background. And I realize some people might see that differently, but that's part of the reason that character hit me the way it did. Is because
also keep in mind that you're looking at it from a 21st century perspective. You know, so you have in other words, you have the advantage of knowing that, you know, this is wrong and immoral, this system of, you know, slavery and everything, and that you know that it's doomed to fail, and that the union's going to win, and all that stuff, and you know, and that's of course, you know, that is what the advantage that you have as time goes on is, you know, what the outcome is going to be, and you know, now it's just I do think story wise that they do a good job of showing the fact that if you happen to be wealthy enough to own land as well as slaves in that society, which, by and large, like the population of the South was nowhere near what the North was, and they were agrarian, they weren't industrialized, and so the concentration of wealth and land was very much concentrated into the hands of a few, because like most of the white people in the South were, they were not wealthy. The few that were, they were the ones who owned the land and owned the slaves, and had their share of the cotton and the other textiles and things like that. So, in other words, they do a good job in that film of showing the aristocratic old antebellum kind of politeness and niceties that you still do find in a lot of Southern culture today, but it's obviously not anywhere near as formalized as it was. And of course, for the people in the South, their lifestyle is, we like to think of it in terms of the fight to free the slaves, which yes, indeed, the southern states, they seceded on the basis of the fact that slavery was, well, not only was it their way of life, but it was their livelihood, because they were the workforce that provided that worked the fields and everything. So I mean, that's one of the key components of chattel slavery as a system, is that not only is it a livelihood, but it is a lifestyle, and it really did define so much of what gave the South its identity. So it was, for them, it was an attack on their property, the lands and the people that they owned. It was an attack on their lifestyle, and it was an attack on their culture. So it was all those things all went together. I think it did a good job of showing that in a way that other films that would come later, that they wouldn't necessarily. Now, granted, they were trying to achieve different things, so like, for example, like something like 12 Years a Slave, that's specifically about a real person's personal struggles as a free man in the North, who gets taken and becomes a slave in the South, and the hardships that he endured. And so it's trying to go for a different type of experience. I don't think it's an either or thing. I think you have to immerse yourself in the period, so that way you see the fact that for the ruling class of this time and place, that they liked the fact that it was this old world kind of romanticism, or at least that's the version that's presented. That's certainly how they would have seen it. And then, of course, if you are not, if you're considered not even a person in the eyes of the law, then it is horrible, So, and there's just other things about the film that that they show that other films haven't really shown since, which is that, and this is just true historically, that after the war, and even after the Emancipation Proclamation, because so many slaves, they had only really known that plantation and that way of life. A lot of them, even after being freed, a lot of them, they had to come back, because it was like, well, they didn't know anything else. And that just tells you how insidious the system was. But it's in other words, like, I think it's one of those things that, yeah, you can not like it as a 21st century person, which, by our standards, absolutely, it's abominable. But it also does a good job of showing how they would have seen themselves, and how, for them, life must have seemed pretty idyllic. And of course, it all comes crashing down on them, which, admittedly, regardless of which side you were on, the Union or the Confederacy, the Civil War was very bloody and very destructive, and there's a reason why our there's a reason why. Go ahead.
Am I remembering correctly? I think it was the Battle of Shiloh. It's considered the bloodiest day in American history in terms of casualties. Or
maybe I know Gettysburg is up there.
Gettysburg was bad too. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that it definitely shows that people even they were fighting for things that we don't agree with today. And obviously, if you were part of the abolitionist movement, or if you were, a union in the Union Army or whatever, you were fighting for that. It's one of those things that there were plenty of people that were fighting that were trying to defend what they saw as their homeland, and they may not have even necessarily owned slaves themselves. And then when it's all over, well, it's basically what Ashley says. He says that some of the world's worst whatever you call it, worst pain has been caused by wars, and when the wars were over, no one ever knew what they were about. And it's like, well, guess what? That that's exactly what happened. They it's just these. I think it's one of those things where no movie should ever be held up as a one and done history lesson. History lesson it should always just be an entree to into the real story. That's always, no matter what time period you're talking about.
And you can say Gone with the Wind is instructive. It is a well-made film. David O. Selznick, I believe, produced this one, and if I recall correctly, he had a reputation for almost lavish faithfulness to the books, but he would glomp on to a book he really loved, and he did the same thing with Rebecca and a couple other films.
Well, in that age, you had more of the classical studio movie mogul.
And I was going to say it's very much a product of its time in a lot of ways. It really, which makes it dated, but it also makes it instructive as a an older thing.
Definitely.
And then of course some of the Oscar nods it got very much showed how the times have changed. But
again, like, it's an extremely impressive piece of work. They never actually shot in the South ever. They shot everything on the back lot, and they used matte paintings and things, which I think is, that was basically the green screen compositing of its day, but looks unbelievable to this day.
Yeah, I always love that. Love it.
Yeah.
So the last bit of Fushi-Yugi reminded you of this? It reminded you of Gone with the Wind, or just the experience?
Well, again, the experience did in part, and this is where I wanted to bring it back a little bit. The biggest issue, more than anything, that I have with Scarlett is how self-serving she is. And Dane, you do bring up a good point that, yes, she, in her mind, had very good reason to look out for number one.
And also think about where she starts as a character versus where she ends, because she is very much a spoiled girl, like very much with a young girl's mindset. And then because of necessity, because of she figures out what she's made of really fast, and what she's made of is a lot stronger than her family.
She is still spoiled, though. She is still selfish. And that's why I get such a delicious charge out of Rhett's final words to her, where he's like, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. Because by that point in the movie, I agreed with him. But
that's like the big thing is that, like, well, with her as a character, like, she's a very complex character. I think the characterizations in that film / book are very rich, because nobody is a simple either or, and as is the case with real life, people don't fit into these convenient boxes, so, like, for her, she's very selfish and burns a lot of bridges and things like that, but at the same time, it's that selfishness and stubbornness that also gives her the strength that people like Ashley Wilkes and Melanie and her father and all that stuff, like, they don't have that grit, the true grit to get through it. But then Ashley and Melanie are both, they're considerably more moral and kind, but then they don't have the strength, they don't have the constitution to get through. It's Scarlett has to carry both of them through most of the movie. And I mean, Ashley says you've carried the load for all of us, you know, and it's true. And Melanie would have died if it hadn't been for her, you know, died in childbirth if it hadn't been for her. So I mean, I think that kind of middle section of the movie tends to be my favorite, just because it's got some great like silhouette shots, and it's just, I think the drama is probably at its highest because I'm very attracted to, you know, stories about survival and people that come from a privileged position having to really figure out what they're made of. And you know, they most definitely did. And it is heartbreaking to see like Tara get destroyed and like the remnants of what, you know, like her kind of seemingly idyllic life is, even though she says that land doesn't mean anything to her, it totally does. I mean, that's why she kept coming back, and like seeing it utterly destroyed, it's like, you know, that's heartbreaking, you know. And I don't know. I have a very deep love for the film, as you can tell. You know, because I think it stands out in the sense of not only epic filmmaking, but I think that it had pretty rich characterizations for the time and for today. And it is on some aspects of, I'm always a fan of whenever movies can portray the side of whatever conflict that lost, you know, kind of like Das Boot, you know, how that really did a lot to humanize those German soldiers who, you know, they're fighting for, you know, the Nazi regime, but they themselves are trying to do what they feel is right. And they kind of know that they're on a losing, you know, that they're fighting a losing battle, but they're trying to do what they feel is right. And of course, you know, so in other words, I think that can be a bit more of a less facile way to tell a story.
Right. And actually, one of my favorite Civil War ones is Ride with the Devil, which features basically mostly people on the side of the South, but like in that gray zone that was a lawless area during the war. No one really knew who to trust and whatever. But yeah, Mo, in answer to your question, like where do we get there from Fushigi Yugi? So Dane, you're right. They do a good job of developing Scarlet. The character in Eikoden who reminded me so much of her is Mayo Sakaki. And in this one, they made a mistake. They tried to do a very quick story. I really think I would have hated Eikoden a lot less if it had been 2 or 3 episodes longer. And part of the reason why is they have a character who starts off as a selfish, manipulative bitch who has no redeeming quality whatever. And then by the midway point of the series, they're trying to make you think she has plenty of redeeming qualities. They're trying to make her this tragic character, and they don't really earn it. There's not enough time in the series to earn that turnaround. I mean, this is a girl who at the start of the series, our protagonist, Tamahome, who's now called Taka, and Miyaka, they get married and they got a kid on the way. And this girl comes along, picks up the book, and manages not only to steal Miyaka's place as the priestess of Suzaku, but steals her baby somehow. And to me, that's just all kinds of wrong. And then does it for no other reason than she wants Tamahome for herself. And it's like, it's the simplest of jealousy and selfishness and all this stuff. And by the time you realize why she did what she did, you're like, okay, I get why you did it. But no, the series has not earned this. It has not earned all of these people. Like I said, I'm not kidding when I say it feels like Romeo and Juliet mixed with the Book of Job. You feel like they are throwing everything at these characters that they can. And they finally gave them a kind of happy ending with the OVA. Why mix it up? Why do this again? Why? And the biggest difference between them was my second viewing of Gone with the Wind was considerably more positive. My second viewing of Akaden was, okay, well, I'm glad I have it. I'm glad I saw it again. I don't hate it as much.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's like,
I mean,
yeah.
to be fair, with something like Gone with the Wind, you can't say that it doesn't take the time to develop its characters,
No,
because it's a very long movie.
Oh yeah.
But again, like, yeah, it's very long, but at the same time, it's like it does. I don't really think it leaves any stones unturned, as far as I know. And I mean,
Oh.
I like.
I've not read the book, but as far as I can tell, I've never heard anyone say it was not a faithful rendition.
I think it was more so that anything that was not quite. It was more of a different take on this character, but.
Well, I guess the idea would be, if you look at it, and first off, because I want to acknowledge the people who comment.
It made a lot of sense for how they.
Oh, hey, what's up, Evan?
Were presented as in the book, from what I understand.
I know that, dude.
So.
Hey, buddy.
All right.
Well, I think Evan's in the gaming groups. If you're into video games, Fushigi does have, or Fushigi Yugi, excuse me, does have a PS2 game and a Nintendo DS game. As far as I know, Gone with the Wind does not.
Actually, okay, this is a good example.
Although that would be quite something.
What would you have considered Scarlet Day?
Be something like Oregon Trail or Gun.
Okay.
Hey, what?
What?
I would say though. Okay, go ahead, Dave.
It probably, if Gone with the Wind was a game, it would probably be something in between like Gun and Oregon Trail.
You have died of dysentery.
Well, and then actually, if they say that, they just need to keep going back to the clip. Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. But actually, think of it like this. Would you have liked the character of Scarlet as much if they did zero backstory to explain her selfish behavior? And just had her as selfish and unlearning for the entire time?
No.
Maybe. I mean, it could be.
If she wasn't a deep character at all, and was kind of a 2D
I don't really think we even need to know all that much.
Because they're selfish characters in a lot of them, but we don't like.
I mean, that's really what makes her great, is that she is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
So maybe
I think part of it also is that, for better or worse, I actually kind of like Rhett as a character, and I really feel he got the short end of the stick a lot where she was concerned.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
So that was part of it too.
Well, so maybe Dane, you might.
That's part of the point of his character.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of the point of Rhett as a character, is that he is the perfect match for Scarlet. She's no lady. He knows exactly what she is, and he loves her. Any scoundrel, and she wants what she thinks she wants, but ultimately is her. Because, well, someone like Ashley, like, yes, he has a moral center, but he is not strong, and she would run right over him and get bored with him really fast. But she kind of idealizes him and see what's right in front of her face, which is a very human thing. A lot of the time when it comes to love, people, they think they want something.
Yeah.
They figure
Keep barking up the wrong tree.
You're out the person that never really existed, and that's what she realized. Yeah,
Scarlet,
and that's what she realizes too late. But again, that's why. Well,
What's up?
that's why she has to realize that tomorrow's a new day. You know.
Scarlett O'Hara is the Joe
Scarlett-
Exotic of well, she's the Joe Exotic of these days. Very similar in their characterization.
Well, and actually,
He probably-
and again, you get different sides of this coin. Like I know that Brandon and I have debated somewhat another anime character that characterization in general, I think he tends to shy away from characters who would be similar to Scarlett in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah.
I think Nabiki Tendo comes to mind, Faye Valentine, Fujiko Mine. You know, a lot of them have a lot of similarities, but they have something else that appeals to me more. Like there's something about the dynamic that doesn't put me off as much, if that makes sense. Like, you know, and we just watched Maverick. I mean, Annabelle Bransford is this sort of character. And we've been watching the old TV show. She's loosely based on a character named Samantha Crawford, who's in the same vein. But in those cases, you've got a situation where they understand each other. I mean, you're right that I think Scarlett has her head in the clouds and doesn't really fully understand the situation. I think in the situations where the characters do see each other eye to eye, like Maverick and Bransford or Crawford, Lupin the Third and Mine, you know, they understand each other, you know, and it works better for me, I think, if that makes sense.
That's the female character screws over the male character in each one.
Well, it depends on what you're looking for, because like in the case of something like Maverick, they have a lot more kind of
more
fun,
comedic for one.
Yeah, well, they're more fun verbal sparring with each other, number one, but also part of the one of the major dramatic anchor points for Scarlett O'Hara and for Gone with the Wind as a whole. One of the major anchor points is not only the internal struggle of what Scarlett really wants or what she should have in terms of a mate, but also that juxtaposed with the fact that her world and the world of everyone she knows is literally crumbling before her eyes. And you know, it's like she figures out what she's really made of, and then the person that, you know, she thinks she wants really can't survive without her. You know, the best that you could really say with Ashley Wilkes is that he is moral, but he's very passive in social situations, but he also is apparently pretty valiant on the battlefield, despite, you know, obviously fighting battles that turn out to be futile. You know, so like he has bravery in a different sense, but not in the sense of just having the stuff, you know, the gumption, shall we say, to rise up from adversity, you know. And so the internal struggles, they match the external ones. And you know, so in that respect, I think that it makes sense for that kind of drama. And I think the acting across the board, like the actors really convey those emotions wonderfully, you know, especially Vivian Lee. It's like, you know, that's probably one of the best female performances I've ever seen on film, as far as really bringing a character to life. Well, and Rhett, you know, the kind of hell that he goes through, like I think a lot of men can relate to having to kind of push a boulder uphill only for it to fall back down again, and they do it out of love, because they know that this person, you know, has the potential to be really, really great, or that you know, they could have a happy life if only this thing were different. And you know, eventually she just wears them out, you know. And again, I think that's very truthful, you know.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think I admit this is one of those ones that I probably need to revisit again eventually. I think sometimes timing can have we've said this before, that timing can be a big factor. And I have been in a similar situation. There was someone that I was very into who was very much this sort of character in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
And yes, it was exhausting.
Yeah. Well, I
And
mean,
it just, yeah.
both of my previous relationships,
Mhm.
they felt like uphill battles, and they felt like I was the only one, trying to make this thing work. And part of it was, well, part of it was my own mistake that you can't make something work. It either does or it doesn't, and people are either on the same page or they're not. And I think that with Scarlet and Rhett, it's a little different just because they are perfect for each other. It's just that she doesn't realize it until it's too late, or seemingly too late. Because again, tomorrow's another day, and it's something that you could definitely say that it fits into that mold. Certainly, for I think a lot of women go through that where they can not necessarily know what they're looking for in a mate, and then a lot of men can relate to like trying to shoulder this burden of responsibility in this relationship, and then eventually they just get worn out because the other person is not pulling their weight. And so it's and granted, I mean, he's no angel himself, because he's, for most of the story, he's not physically there for her. I mean, he helps her get out of jams a few times, but like in instances where he could be really, really helpful, he's mostly not there. And so that's kind of his own failings, is that he doesn't have that kind of gallantry that somebody like Ashley sort of exemplifies or tries to. So it's something that that's a flaw for him. And I mean, I can understand from her perspective why she would have a bitterness towards him, because like he really could have been there to help them get all the way to Tara, and he abandons her, after having gotten her out of Atlanta. But so I could understand why that's not an especially attractive quality in a man, someone that just up and leaves you, so I mean, I don't think he's entirely blameless in anything.
Well, don't you worry, Jake. I'm never gonna leave you. Okay.
With that lovely thought, I figure we can move on. Mo, I know we haven't heard from you and Dave as much, but I figure I'd start back with you, Mo. Do you have anything fun you've seen fairly recently that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I got a couple quick ones that we can throw out there real quick. The first one is more of just a brief warning to stay the hell away from automaton transfusion. I know you're thinking you want to see good low-budget zombie action. That does not fall in that category. It's like a bunch of Hot Topic kids who thought they were edgy because they listened to Slipknot, got together and made a movie that immediately was aged badly, For some reason, they decided... Yeah, much like the band themselves. It's just horrible, man. And for some reason, half of the movie they decided to do in this really choppy frame rate as like an artistic choice. So it just looks like one of those digital music videos you would get on like a Digipack CD back in the day, and it's fucking horrible. Ooh. So, I'm all about defending trash a lot of the time, but this is that. It's not the trash you rescue out of the dumpster. You let it go to the landfill. It belongs there. On a more fun note, though, I did watch The Houses That October Built. The first one. Yeah, I just finally saw that. And I enjoyed it quite a bit, though it was not what I was expecting it to be. It's very much just a tour of haunted houses with a bit of a horror movie tacked onto it. I do like that they shot it in a bunch of real haunts and interviewed a bunch of real employees and people that did do those things, So that was a nice touch. But I think it's one of those ones
cool when they got kind of more off the beaten path with some of the more extreme ones that are, a little bit questionable in terms of safety.
Oh yeah, and you have to go on like a rad scavenger hunt to even find like the directions to the location that it's at and things like that. It's I imagine that'd be exciting. I hope that really exists out
crazy.
there.
I'm sure it does. I mean, hey, we got in much of those same backwoodsy areas, we got the Tiger King. So I mean, anything is possible at this point.
Well, and that McCamey Manor exists publicly, and that thing is insane. So imagine what they're doing behind closed doors. What's that, Brennan?
With that being said, you bring up an interesting point with that film. I love the houses that October built. It was a really cool found footage. Who here has actually seen the sequel?
I have.
Okay, without spoiling it, because I don't want Mo to have it spoiled in case he actually does decide to watch it. What do you think?
I'm gonna grab it.
What do you think, Dave? Do you think that the original film would have been much better if they had left well enough alone and not made that sequel the way they did?
See, I am of the opposing nature where each are kind of like their own animals of films, because the first film I know I picked up and I watched it, and though I liked it, I was not impressed by it.
That ending pissed my girlfriend off, I'm pretty sure, because she just said straight up, like, it's the only movie I've ever watched with you I didn't like. And
then she might actually like watching the second one. Because again, it's I'm not going to say it, but I will say that it's that she might like the second one if the ending made her mad.
right. Which I kind of liked the ending. I liked because their whole quest was to go ahead.
I do have to say I do have to go back and rewatch them because I didn't go on about them at the time that I had watched them. So,
I mean, have you ever actually
for a rewatch?
I mean, have you really ever watched one of these movies that watching the sequel totally rearranged and changed everything that you thought about the lore of a movie? Or the lore of a particular group of people in a movie that didn't even seem like it was plausible at the beginning, and now all you can think of is that lore when you watch the first movie, and then you wonder, well, that just changed the whole experience for better or for worse, because it can be for the better as well.
I don't know how many of them I've seen that it was a complete rewrite. Although, again, that was one of the issues I had with Eikiden, was they seemed to be trying to rewrite the rule book. And there are others like that. Like we were trying to get Dave to watch Higurashi. You could say Ray kind of does that to that series.
Ray is an oddball.
So you get those. But as far as movies, like one example of is we did do the discussion of Your Name. And as y'all know, I love Your Name. It's wonderful. It's absolutely brilliant film. And there's very little reference to Your Name in Weathering with You, but there is one very direct reference, and it completely changes the ending of the movie. It's like if you see Weathering with You, it completely changes the ending, and where you're like, well, I guess it was a happy ending from it wasn't. You know what I mean? Like it changes the whole wow. So this is what they had to look forward to.
Well, that's the thing, though. But that particular director doesn't like his characters to have happy endings.
No, he doesn't. He's so depressing.
But yeah, I agree. Though Houses October built, great movie. And I also understand that feeling about sometimes a movie is bad beyond the ability to be so bad it's good.
It's not a bad movie.
Yes.
At the time, I just didn't. For some reason, the antagonists, even though some of them creeped me out, it didn't give me the creep factor that I wanted.
Which one?
Houses October. I
no.
hope he's never had to sit through a
Sounds
automaton
interesting.
transfusion. I wouldn't wish that on my enemies, you know. I could see going into it expecting it to be more of like a regular horror movie and being bummed on it, you know.
Well, I wasn't expecting it to be a horror movie. I was expecting for something to happen, and nothing really all that happened until the very end. And even then, it was like, okay, well,
It leaves you hanging for sure. But I mean, I liked that because their whole quest was to find the haunted house that blurred the line of reality. Like, you didn't know that it wasn't real anymore. And so I like the ending being open, because it's like you could think of it as they really just buried him alive, or you could think of it as this is a fucked up haunted house gimmick that they just haven't revealed yet, you know?
So speaking of endings that just totally mess with you, I've been trying to get through my eBay purchases, and Dave, this is one that you had put with the group a while back. I finally picked up a copy of Phantasm.
really,
And I had totally forgotten that messed up ending. I was like, what the hell is this?
well, the thing is, it goes with the other films. I mean, it builds up. The series does,
Yeah.
and to me, it's a very weird film, just like the Return to Salem's Lot was. You know. Which was a very interesting film for people, which I actually think for Salem's Lot, for those who love Salem's Lot, see the second one too.
I need to read and see that. I never have.
I've read it, and I have not seen the original or the sequel for
I
the
saw
movie.
the character who's featured in The Dark Tower.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, well, I'm looking more forward for the Dark Tower that's eventually going to be real. That Stephen King is going to be eventually trying to redo in a couple of years.
I hope so, yeah.
Yeah, that was actually, I thought that. Now, I have not seen the movie because I love the book series so much that it's one of those things that I'm looking at, and I don't want it to destroy my my thoughts of it. But the casting,
Again, Matthew McConaughey
Your
is a
thoughts
great
of-
man in black.
oh yeah, the casting for Randall Flagg was perfect with Matthew McConaughey.
If you watch it as a movie that is not technically Stephen King, if you watch it as just a movie on its own, I could see it that way. The thing is, if you were a lover of the book, you're definitely not going to love the movie.
Yeah, I didn't love it. I didn't like hate it. You know,
I didn't.
The casting, I think, is probably the best part of it.
I think Idris Elba was a good cast. The thing is, you had to take it the way Stephen King took it, and they tried to cram it all in one big ass movie, and it just wasn't jiving.
Well, it was intentionally a sequel rather than an adaptation.
Yeah.
I'd rather just see an adaptation where they do a TV series, maybe a season for each book. I think that would be great. But and I also think, as well received as it was, use that as a jumping off point for a movie series based on King's interconnected mythology.
Well, if it was anything like Doctor Sleep, then come on, bring it on. So
I still need to see that.
The King adaptations have always been it's a grab bag of good and bad.
Yes.
You never know what you're gonna get. But now, don't get me wrong, though. I have yet to see a Stephen King adaptation that I have hated. I have always been at least mildly amused at them. I mean, one of my favorite adaptations is The Night Flyer, though the short story is much better. The Night Flyer is just fun. I mean, the book I liked even more because the end scene, just one of the things I remember the most is when the guy is hunting down the vampire, and near the end, he notices at first just a picture on the wall, and he sees like just basically this stream of urine going into the toilet or the urinal, and there's nothing attached to it. So it's just, to me though, there's this different Stephen King, for what he's worth. We were talking about depth of character.
Yeah.
Stephen King is all about creating depth of character, which sucks when it comes to a movie because it tends to screw the pacing. People rave about how terrible they thought the TV version of The Shining was. But to me, when you got to the end of it, when it got to where it was moving, I thought those characters were better fleshed out, and I cared a heck of a lot more about those characters than I did for any of the ones in the Kubrick adaptation. Mm-hmm. It's not that, but the Kubrick adaptation was a different thing. It was an art piece itself. But the the TV adaptation was a true adaptation of the book and the characterization. Oh, and by the way, Michael McNally, hello to you, and best wishes as well.
Oh, hey, what's up, Michael?
Hi.
Hope you're doing good out there.
I'm glad that Stephen King I'm glad that they got a version of The Shining that they liked and that was true to Stephen King's vision. Because I know that he and Stanley Kubrick, they are very opposite in terms of just their overall view of humanity and, that sort of thing. Because, I mean, Stanley, his films tend to be fairly bleak, or if they are in any way optimistic, it's through the back door instead of...
Yeah.
I know.
And, like his comedies are dark comedies, like Dr. Strangelove is one of the funniest movies ever made, but let's bleed.
I know how much you put Kubrick on a pedestal, and I get it. And I get that Kubrick was an artist, because I absolutely loved his 2001: A Space Odyssey. And I loved his adaptation of Clockwork Orange. Yep. So it's not that I dislike Kubrick in his visions of what I just feel like he was not a fair judge of character when it came to The Shining myself. So.
Well, with that being said, we should indicate that Inside Movies Galore did do a version of The Shining, and Dane was with us at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And though he's not with us right now, it was. But I always have considered Kubrick's version of it was, he looked at the book and drew a picture of his thoughts on the story,
and then he threw it out the window.
So I don't think that it was like that movie. What was it? What was that movie? The documentary movie, that Room something.
Room 137, was it?
Oh, about all the hidden stuff in The Shining.
Oh yeah, right.
That went off the rails. I mean, there was like, yes, and then they were driving by a burning Volkswagen like the one in the book to show how Kubrick had planned to destroy King. And I'm like, okay.
Didn't they also say that the kid's sweater with the rocket could point towards the conspiracy with him faking the moon landing or whatever?
Yeah, filming the moon landing.
And then they suppostly pointed to the Nazi stuff.
Sorry, there. I got
the film.
Oh, we were just talking about that lovely documentary about all of the kind of conspiracy and potential themes behind The Shining, which I think also came up in the Inside Movies Galore discussion.
That documentary was such horseshit.
I mean, it has a
Really
couple of
didn't care
interesting
for it.
things in it, but most of it is like, yo, this is some ancient alien shit right here. Like,
The one I could have
I was gonna
believed.
say, like, so much of it is like,
The one that I could have believed was the one about
Go ahead.
the Indians and their that first one, but the rest of them were mostly
oh
hard.
yeah,
Oh, here's a totally random thought I'm just having. This would be so awesome. Like for the Dark Tower, like I said, when they do a series, part of the conceit of the Dark Tower is they're moving in and out of worlds, right? They're going into completely different worlds. So what they need to do is they need to have each of those worlds done by a different director. And you'll have like you'll go in and they can be completely random. I think
that'd be awesome.
Better, yeah. Like you could have one directed by David Lynch, and you'd have one directed by Alexander Payne, and one by Darren Aronofsky, and one by
That'd be awesome.
by Mel Gibson. You know, you get some totally random names in there, and it might be a lot of fun. You know.
that would be really cool. I mean, the only way I could see that happening is if you had like a Cloud Atlas situation where they made that so far out of the conventional Hollywood system to where they could have, you know, the Wachowskis and the other director whose name I can't remember, who did run. Yeah, I did Run Lola Run.
Yeah,
I mean, and they did it. Well, and they did it largely in Germany, and with money that was outside of the normal studio system. So, in a lot of ways, you could think of it as kind of, sort of an independent film in a way, even though it so doesn't look like one. But it did a lot of very ambitious things that a studio would never have allowed, and the fact that they got Tom Hanks on board. And the fact that he was so enthusiastic about the project, I think that was what helped other people sign on and what helped secure the financing and everything like that.
And Hanks has worked again with, I think Tykwer, if I remember correctly, was the director of A Hologram for the King, which I thought was an underrated movie. That one should have gotten more love. Yeah.
Well, Lionsgate and RLJE, they seem to be putting out things that they, you know, are not necessarily like stereotypical studio films, but they do things that most of the studios they wouldn't have the guts to do. I mean, that's why, like, you know, they wouldn't touch Bone Tomahawk or Brawl in Cell Block 99 or Dragged Across Concrete, or I'm just thinking, just rattling off the S. Craig Zahler films off the top of my head, but like just things that, you know, don't fit neatly into your average demographic tests or what the focus group says or what.
Yeah. Well, that is a good point. I think a lot of them, it's to me. I actually look at Lionsgate when I first was. I remember when I first got introduced to Lionsgate, I thought to myself, "This is the group that'll publish anything." I remember really looking at it as like some of the films I really like that not many people would touch they put out, but sometimes some of the films that I wonder how did they get released seem to also be by that company.
Hey, someone's got to do that holy work, you know. Just put that shit out there.
Rose Red, if you're looking at like Stephen King stuff, that one right there is a Lionsgate release, and one of these days we got to cover that on the show because that is on the Inside Movies Galore, because it is a great one. But every time I pitched it, people are like, "It's too long. We can't do it." So I'm like, "Okay, well."
Oh, we can do it.
Well, someone could pitch Stephen King Summer or something like that.
Well, we actually the deadline for topic submissions is tomorrow. So
Oh, is it?
yes,
Oh.
Give you mine, I think.
And how are we doing it this time? Is everyone doing 2 possibles or 1 or? How are we doing?
2 possibles each. So a little bit of inside ball for those of y'all who like our Inside Movies Galore discussions. We actually have only 2 because I thought I'd written the others down, but apparently I did not write the other ideas down that we got. The only one I had was Superhero Summer and Strange Summer at this point, which Strange Summer was just oddball stuff that just flies a tad bit off the handle. So,
Oh boy.
but again, I would love to be able to get everything together and just get that done so we've got that vote going.
Nice. See, well, I've got a nice 4-hour drive I got to do directly after this, so I'll use that time to narrow down my submissions there.
Oh, it looks like Jake's put some survival game summer and kaiju July.
Oh yeah. Either of those would be sick.
I figure since everyone just got the Godzilla set, that would be good.
Well, if worst comes to worst, if we resubmitted it for August, then we'd have that Gamera set too going out. And we've never covered the original Godzilla movie.
I know. What's wrong with us?
But yeah, some stuff that's just kind of cool. But yeah, we've got a lot of interesting concepts and ideas, and I think that movie discussion in and of itself is just fun.
So just to clarify, by survival game summer, I'm basically saying survival type stuff where there is an element of sport. Might not be fun. What's that?
Like The Hunt.
Yes, exactly.
Battle Royale.
Exactly.
Well, with that being said, actually, I think we'll go ahead and start wrapping up a little bit early this time since we've lost Dane. But of course, if you want to find more of him, there is a channel that you can actually watch of his, and it is going to be it is normally in my in my stuff, but for these, unfortunately, actually no, it'll be in the come to think of it, I do include it. So his channel is actually down in the description below. It is, hold on there, it is called, what the heck was that? That's exactly what it was called.
Just mad.
But I do have the channel sitting there on mine, so you can check it out. It's got some cool stuff, including his film school series that he's going to start, some interesting pickups, and a little bit of vlogging himself. So most definitely you should check it out. And of course, you should check out the channels of these fine people here around me. With Drunken Master Studios heading us up with some amazing stuff, and I can't wait to see the wrap up to that kaiju kaiju quarantine series.
Yeah, I've got some good stuff coming, man, for sure. I just gotta get it all up there and published.
And then, of course, there is Dave with Inside Movies Galore and Delusions of Grandeur, where you can find some interesting and in-depth reviews, interviews, and movie discussions. I get to partake in myself, and we're going to be covering some really cool lower budget scenes, video violence and darkness, and no, not the one you're thinking of.
Which
That's going to be a good time.
So you should definitely check that out if you liked any of our discussion at all, and that'll be tomorrow night. And of course, Jake has some wonderful wildlife on his channel, but hopefully he will increase the wildlife videos as the summer goes on.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get your struggles with maybe going into some beekeeping areas or something like that.
I actually do have a video filmed, but I have some work to do before I'm ready to. I want to see if I can put together an opening like sequence that might be fun. So we'll see. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you should try hitting Dan up. Maybe maybe he could record you or help you get recorded a like opening song.
Yeah, he needs to sing more songs about nature, so you should definitely do that.
Yeah, so find us some murder hornets and you could do like Cody Peterson and make your fame by getting bitten by everything. He gets stung by everything, so you would just need to get bitten by everything, and there you go.
Yeah, and then we could do a discussion on tsunami.
So with that being said, I wish you all well, and again, a thank you for everybody that has participated.
And thanks for having us, man. It's fun.
Definitely.
We will bid you all a good night.
Good night, all.